This episode of Popcorn Poops is brought to you by Audible.com. Please visit audibletrial.com/popcornpoops for a 30-day trial of their audiobook subscription service. When you sign up, you'll even receive a free audiobook that's yours to keep whether or not you continue with Audible after your trial has expired. That's audibletrial.com/popcornpoops for your free audiobook.
We are the Popcorn Poops. Welcome to Popcorn Poops, the best married couple movie podcast / commentary track hybrid audio program on the internet. My name is Dustin, and with me, as always, is my wife, Jessica.
Hello.
Say hello, Jessica.
Hello, Jessica.
Oh, you did it.
I did.
You got jokes for days, baby. As always, you can find us on our website at popcornpoops.com. You can subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher. That's where you can get the show. You can follow us on Twitter and on Facebook, where you can get updates about the show, including our weekly movie still identification game. You can also follow us individually on Twitter. I am at Dusty Cram Cram.
I'm at Jessie Casper.
And if you want to support the show, the GoFundMe page is no more. Well, it's not is no more. It still is more, but there's a new way that you can donate to us. There is a donate button on the website now, and it's a PayPal donation, so there's no like weird fees involved in it. Just go to the website, click the donate button, and toss us some scratch if you like the show. You can also do the Audible thing. That helps too. We also have a new merchandise shop. Ooh. So if you go to the website and the banner across the top, you'll see a new little link that has replaced the forum because no one was using our forums, and it says shop. So if you click shop, you can go, and we got some t-shirts and some buttons and a tote bag. Not a whole lot right now, but we will be adding to the shop in the future. But for now, if you would like a Popcorn Poops t-shirt,
show your poo pride.
That's something that you can do, is show your poo pride, so to speak. This month, our theme is hashtag Gaijin Month. Gaijin, of course, being the Japanese word for foreigner. And that means we're doing movies about foreigners in Japan, specifically directed by non-Japanese filmmakers. So that's non-Japanese people about the movie is about non-Japanese people, and it's directed by non-Japanese people. And this week we are doing a movie it's very, very close to my heart that I hope you listeners were able to get a copy of. If you can, we highly recommend it. It's Fran Rubel-Kazui's 1988 film Tokyo Pop. If you want to sync this podcast to the movie, as you can do with all of our episodes, you're going to want to pause the film as soon as the Spectrafilm vanity card completely fades to black. Now, while you're doing that, I think Jessica has something to read to us. What is it that you have to read to us?
It's a review.
Is it a review?
It's a real review.
We got a review on what? What did we get it on?
iTunes.
We got it on iTunes. Okay, go. Take it away.
It's my favorite kind of review, too.
What kind is that?
It's a 5-star review.
Oh my goshness.
That uses the Oxford comma in the title.
Holy shit. Well, go. Do it.
Delightful, informative, and engaging. This is by Banjo T. Cat. It's very rare for husband and wife teams to sustainably create entertaining media. Dustin and Jessica Kramer are one of those rarities. Their commentaries are more than serviceable when played along with a film or by themselves. They always have something interesting to say, keep pace with the films being watched, and drop in jokes here and there that give the podcast an extra kick. Jessica sounds sweet as sugar, and Dustin has a voice for radio, making the podcast great to listen to just in terms of broadcast quality alone. If ever I need a new perspective on a favorite film or introduction to something that I should have seen a long time ago, Popcorn Poops is the podcast I put on.
There was a lot of alliteration in that last sentence.
It was good.
And I dig the hell out of it. Thank you very much, Banjo T Cat. Hell of a username, too.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
That's all the way around. I'm giving a 5-star review of that 5-star review. I'm doing that right now. If you would like to leave us a 5-star review or any other star review, I mean, we encourage honesty, but we really
honesty first, guys.
Yeah, we really do like the 5 stars. You can leave us one on iTunes or Stitcher, and we will read it on the show. So be sure to do that, and we'll be happy to read it. Now, on to the movie. Sinkers, press play at the beep after the countdown. Ready? 3, 2, 1. And we're off with a movie that probably no one listening to this has seen, and may not even be able to get their hands on it.
It's going to be hard.
This movie has been out of print for a long time. It had something of a Laserdisc release, I think. I think that's the best quality that you can probably get it in, and I'm still on the hunt for that Laserdisc. I do have a VHS copy of this that I'm very proud of. But yeah, this is one of those kind of dead on VHS or technically dead on Laserdisc things. And I had known about this movie for years and years and years before I, came across it. And, I've said this a few times this month already. I'm kind of a dyed in the wool weeaboo. I know, I hate the word too. I've had an interest in Japan for years and years. Of course, we lived in Japan for 5 years and moved back to the States this past summer. And I never actually got around to watching this movie, although it had been on my radar for a long time. And then I ended up finding a copy of it, watched it, and I was like, holy shit, this movie gets it. Like, and it's fortunate that I watched it after having been in Japan for a few years, because I don't think I would have appreciated it as much. And as it stands, this movie gets the gaijin experience, to coin a phrase that maybe I've heard before, but fuck it, I don't know. The gaijin experience, trademark. This movie gets it.
Right,
Absolutely fucking gets it. And it's a thing that I put on, like I was live tweeting this thing when I watched it the first time, fully intending to just tear it the fuck apart and be like, look at this 80s trash. Look at this junk.
I mean, and we just opened with a song, and there's going to be a lot of songs in this.
It is a music movie,
and
right?
Some of it's kind of funny.
Right.
And
yes.
so it's easy on the surface to kind of make fun of it.
Right.
But
yeah, like after shit tweeting it for most of the movie, toward the end of the movie, it just starts hitting home really hard, and it starts nailing these emotions and nailing these ideas. And I'm just like, oh my God, this movie is speaking directly to me, and it gets it. Like, it totally gets it. After last week tearing Lost in Translation apart, which is a movie that absolutely does not get the gaijin experience at all. It's a
beautiful movie.
Right. But it's a white girl's fantasies abroad in a foreign country where she doesn't give a shit about the foreign country or the culture or anything like that. And the Ramen Girl gets it better than Lost in Translation.
Oh,
absolutely. And Ramen Girl was another surprise. I mean, it's one of those things where I watched this and I'm like, the person who wrote and directed this movie has lived in Japan.
You know it immediately. Well, maybe not immediately, but after you get a ways into the movie, you get this sense and you're like, this writer has lived in Japan. And you would be correct.
Yes. She's actually Fran Rubel-Kazooie. Welcome back to Popcorn Poops.
Yeah.
That's a crazy thing to say. I would also like to say that this is the first director, the first filmmaker that we have completely finished his or her body of work on Popcorn Poops, because she's only made 2 films. The first, of course, is, I think it was from 1993, one of our first episodes, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. If the name Fran Rubel-Kazooie sounds familiar and you've watched Buffy... 92. The reason would be that her and her husband, Kaz Kazooie, she moved abroad to Japan, married a Japanese guy by the name of Kaz. I think
they actually met while she was living in Manhattan.
Oh, okay. All right.
So they actually met in America, and then after spending time together in Japan, they began their own film distribution company.
Yes, that's right. Kazooie Enterprises or something like that? Or was it Lorimar?
Something like that. I don't know the name of it, actually. But they were selling films of friends, distributing them.
Yeah, in Japan. Like the Coppola, like
the Coen brothers.
The Coen brothers. Sorry, what did they do?
Spike Lee.
Spike Lee, but did they do?
Those are the only 2 I know off the top.
Francis Ford Coppola? Maybe not.
I don't think so. Not that I know of. Just the Coen brothers and Spike Lee that I know of. And then it wound up leading to them having a life where they worked back and forth between America. They had and Japan. They had homes in both places that they owned. And so it's just it's very clear they now live in Japan.
Mm-hmm. They live in Nikko,
which is the most beautiful place on the planet that I have ever seen in my entire life, hands down.
We happened to go at a very good time to go. There was just snow everywhere.
It was not real.
It looked like a fantasy land.
It was not real. It was so incredible. But yeah, they live in what from my meager life experience that I have had,
right.
It is the most beautiful place in the world I have ever seen in my life, 100%.
But they run like a yoga studio or something like that.
They turned like an old shrine or something into their house. It's really artsy and cool and unfair.
is super unfair. But they're doing cool stuff. You know, they've lived cool lives. They distributed films, made a couple of films, were executive producers on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel because of their involvement with the movie, and I guess that probably bankrolled most of their lives and allowed them to do whatever they want. And the weird thing is that the most interesting thing about them is a tiny little footnote in her filmography, and that is this movie. And I think it's just fascinating that this exists, you know, and she is who she is, and you know, they've had the lives that they've had. But here we are talking about Tokyo Pop. Let's walk through the movie. I think we should probably walk through the movie because most people are not going to be able to get their hands on this and sync it up. So we start the movie and we see our main character, Wendy Reed, played by Carrie Hamilton, and she's singing with her band where her boyfriend is the lead singer. And she's, you know, she asks him, hey, are you going to let me sing my song? Am I going to get to sing lead at any point? And he's like, you know, I don't know. Like, I'm talking to this other girl over here, and you know, she wants to sing, and you get the impression that he's kind of pushing her out of the band or pushing her out of an opportunity to sing.
And she's like very out. I mean, she's like playing tambourine and shit, right? Like it's like he doesn't really care about her musical ambitions.
So she gets home and she has received a postcard from one of her girlfriends in Japan that says, "Hey, it's great over here. You know, I'm just having the time of my life and all this kind of stuff." And she's like, "You know what? Fuck it." As she tells one of her other friends, she's like, she's from New York, and she says, LA sucks too, but it's just the weather's better. So I'm just going to go somewhere where they like foreigners, where like I've got a head start on everybody because I'm different. I'm automatically different. And I get the feeling that she already understands that she already understands that her going to Japan means she's different and she's going to catch someone's eye because of that. Right. And
well,
she means to exploit that.
This movie does this incredible thing repeatedly throughout the film, and I think it's kind of the thing that it does kind of makes it why when you first start watching the film that you could shit tweet it for a while and you could be kind of shitty about it until it subverts all the things that it's setting up. So one of the great things that this film does is it dismantles the notion of the West over East superiority thing.
Right.
And it starts setting all of that up by like the television program where, gosh, I love this stuff with her trying to, if you do have a copy of this part where Wendy's walking around trying to like use the telephones in the train station and doesn't realize she needs a card and shit like that. Like just constant barriers of entry everywhere she goes. Mm-hmm. She's asking for help from someone. This is a pachinko parlor.
Also, they're
not going to help her.
The payphones, I guess, haven't changed in 30 fucking years.
Guess not.
Because they look
exactly the same,
identical today as they did apparently in 1988.
I never once used one.
I didn't either. I think I tried to once and couldn't figure it out.
Because you got to have a card and shit.
I guess so, but I guess that's the reason.
But anyways, so it sets up this notion immediately because she sees this she mentioned seeing a television program that says it suggests a negative stereotype that it's innately easier for Westerners to find long-lasting success in Japan because the idea behind it that has to push this sort of thing is that somehow Americans or Westerners are superior to Japanese and Japanese recognize this. I mean, that's not what the TV program said, obviously, but that's the motion behind it.
Yeah.
And so she goes there believing this, and she immediately is going to be told, like right here in this scene, that they love blondes. Go ahead and talk about.
So that scene right there, I think that scene is it's so small and it's such a tiny detail, and it doesn't mean much in the grand scheme of things. But I think it's like for a movie that was made in 1988, I think it's really cool that we have an LGBT character of some kind. We've got, you know, a person who's clearly biologically male, dressed very femininely. I don't know if it's trans character. I don't know if it's a cross-dresser, but she gets help from this person.
Wendy gets help from
this person, and no attention is drawn to this fact whatsoever. That this person
I will
is
say the
different at
person,
all.
the acting in that scene is there. It's not great.
No, but that's the whole movie, right?
I guess that's kind of true.
Right.
We're not saying this is like a cinematic masterpiece.
I think, well, on some level, I think it is. I think this is an unsung masterpiece of theme.
Okay, yes.
But I think it's just a little detail that she interacts with this character, and there's no specific attention drawn. I love this shot right here of her coming down the stairs with the train in the background. Oh my God, it's just it's beautiful. Anyway, there's no attention drawn to this, and I love that. I love that it's just here's a character that she interacts with. Here's another person.
Well, and my whole thing is if you've been listening this whole month, then you've been getting more than you want to hear of lit theory, and especially talking about the other in that in terms of that. So because I wrote a paper on this movie and Lost in Translation, where I basically set it up saying that Lost in Translation fails, this movie gets it when you're talking about dealing with the other in cinema. And so one of the things that I noted is that character, the trans character, it's like the first person she meets who is not Japanese, who is also not Japanese, the first person she meets who speaks English to her well enough to help her is another other. Like, it's still setting it up that they're constant. Everything she comes in contact with, the closest thing she can get to familiar is still an other for her.
Right. Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think that character in the United States would still, like, it doesn't matter where that character is. In the United States, in a country where ethnically she shares she shares a commonality with the people around her, normativity, if you will. But in the United States or in a country like that person is even an outsider, still an outsider.
But in this situation, that person is as close to the same as her as she's going to get.
Yeah, exactly. There's a bond that's shared instantly.
And that's something that I cannot stress enough about how quickly, and it's kind of like magic how that happens when you're abroad, how the other foreigners become your family so quickly. But because she's new to this, all of these people who she's meeting in this scene right now, all of these other foreigners at the Mickey house that she's staying at, are the other to her as well. They're outsiders to her as well.
I mean, they all come and this is a fact of moving to Japan. They've all come to Japan for different reasons. They've all got different goals. They're all pursuing different things. They're all getting by in different ways. This is an aspect of foreigner life in Japan that I didn't experience exactly because I feel like this is communal foreigner living with people that I get the feeling are here undocumented. They're here illegally.
Yeah, I've gotten that feeling too from this movie.
And that is a specific kind of foreigner culture in Japan that I was never a part of. I was always documented when I was in Japan. We were both. We were always there legally, so to speak. But yeah, I think that's really interesting because we never really experienced that kind of communal living, that kind of being paid under the table and just trying to get by any way we can. So that's pretty interesting. What we've got, what I want to talk about, like from the beginning of the movie, because I missed some things. The movie opens. I love the way it opens. We open on a musical number. Like I said, of her singing backup for this band. We hear a male's voice singing, but the opening shot of the movie is Wendy. It's just an unassuming, unremarkable medium shot of our main character, Wendy, right? And that's it. And she's waiting for her cue to say her one lyric that she shares with the lead singer.
What is it, you?
You. I think that's it. All the music in this movie, all of the music that's not covers. A lot of the music is covers, but all of the original music was written by a guy named Alan Brewer. I don't think the music is bad in this movie. I know you disagree. I don't think it's terrible. I think it's kind of okay.
Okay.
In one song in particular that just gets into the very core of your soul.
It gets into the core of your soul, perhaps.
That saxophone.
Oh my God.
You've never heard a better saxophone since Careless Whisper. Come on, let's be real. If you can find the soundtrack to Tokyo Pop, the title track, not the title track, but the first track, what's the name of the song? The Way You Make Me Feel. No, it's not The Way You Make Me Feel. What is it? That's one of the lyrics in the song. But yeah, the first track on the soundtrack is great. Oh, You Love Me Just Enough to Let Me Go. I think that's what it's called. But it's spoiler for the end of the movie, kind of. So, of course, Wendy goes to Japan, and I would say that I've known people who went to Japan for worse reasons, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love her singing Home on the Range here.
I love it and hate it.
It's so awful.
Well, so she's been guided by these other foreigners who live in a, and I'm going to use their pronunciation, the movie's pronunciation, ryokan. Yikes. Which is not what it actually, like...
It's not actually a ryokan?
Yeah, it's not actually a ryokan. It's... They call it ryokan in the movie, or what would be a ryokan, which they call it a Japanese inn. But I've never seen one that's run this way.
Yeah, I don't know. This looks like a hostel to me. The Mickey House, it just looks like what a hostel would be.
Yeah, kind of. I mean,
like a privately run hostel.
With really disgusting Disney characters all over the
place. They
place.
call it Mickey House because it's like filled with Mickey shit. And
I could never get over the Disney obsession in Japan, especially with the baby versions of the characters.
God. Oh, very unfortunate.
Puke. I hate that shit. But yeah, so she is guided to her job in Japan by these foreigners who say, "Hey, you should be a hostess." And
this is another favorite scene, by the way, if you are watching this.
Oh,
movie.
this is a great scene. So she ends up in the hostess club where she is asked to sing karaoke or karaoke, and she has to sing Home on the Range. And I have to say, I've never been asked to sing Home on the Range, but I have been requested to sing certain English songs because they wanted to be heard. So, I believe the first time I went to Japan in like 2007 it was when we visited, I was requested to sing Eye of the Tiger by Survivor.
All I Want for Christmas Is You.
Oh yeah,
even if it's not Christmas.
Even if it's not Christmas.
Michael Jackson songs.
The scene that we just saw was Hiro's family. So Hiro's family is very non-traditional.
Yeah.
And I really love that.
Throughout this movie, I was talking about Kazooie dismantles the notion of the West over East superiority, and we'll talk more about this later. But another one of the things that she does is she challenges your preconceptions about Japan. And I think she does it incredibly intentionally, knowing that the audience is going to be primarily American.
Well, think about like Mr. Baseball. What happens when we see a family, like a family setting in that movie? It's extremely
traditional,
buttoned up. Like the grandmother is wearing a kimono, and it's very quiet, very serene.
But
sitting on tatami.
The first shot you get in this movie of a Japanese person, of Hiro, you've got him on stage dressed like an American rocker, playing a harmonica and singing Blue Suede Shoes.
Yeah.
And then, though his family is not actually that unusual in real world modern Japan, I don't think his family is actually that weird. I think they're pretty normal for modern Japan,
but non-traditional.
They're not normal in the eyes of the stereotypes that we've set up in the West. So when we see, like, for instance, his father makes plastic food for a living. Totally awesome.
Oh, look, it's a gaijin movie rule. Refuse taxi service. That's a thing. It's a thing.
It's a thing that I never experienced, but
we've
I guess
talked
it's
about
a thing.
this, yeah.
Anyways, so Hiro's father makes plastic food for a living. His mother is depicted in aerobics clothing, putting on makeup at the breakfast table, and claiming to be too busy to clean or cook up or do anything.
Right.
Clean or cook meals or do anything.
Right.
His sister is the best one.
Who's like, I mean, she's got to be in her late teens, early 20s, and she's practicing how to use chopsticks.
Yeah, she's watching a TV program that's teaching her how to use chopsticks. I'm not weirded out by this, guys. Not at all. Like, I'm just like, yeah, I knew Japanese people who were trying to like learn. They'd say that they sucked at using chopsticks, and they'd like try to learn how to do it better. Grandfather, who's always shown wearing traditional clothing.
Yes, whether it's a yukata or a jinbei or something, he's always
in traditional clothing. By the end of the movie, he confesses to having loved boogie woogie.
Yes.
In his youth.
That's his Western indulgence.
And he praises a recording of Hiro's rock and roll and seems to pretty much approve of Hiro dating a foreigner.
Yeah.
Doesn't really blink an eye about it.
Yeah.
And also in that scene where his family is sitting on the floor to eat their meal, what are they eating?
Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Right?
Kentucky.
The traditional Buddhist altar where Hiro's grandpa is praying.
That's later.
It's later, but it's set up behind a wall that has posters of the Beatles on it.
Yeah.
She immediately is trying to challenge the viewers' preconceptions about Japan.
Absolutely.
And it's not like she's doing it in a weird way. This is totally normal stuff. It's just not the stereotype.
I mean, like Hiro's day job. Hiro has a day job. He works in a little crepe shop.
Yep.
He makes crepes. That shit's real. And it's crowded by like schoolgirls.
And they are
waiting
so
to get
delicious.
crepes.
My God.
Dude, I would fucking kill a human being for
to
a crepe.
have a real crepe right now.
Oh my God, I would do it.
Custard with whipped cream and strawberries. That would be my filling.
I gotta go with like the cheesecake one. The cheesecake one's a pretty goddamn good.
I don't need to get fancy.
That's not fancy.
It's fancy when you add cake to it.
No, they stuff cheesecake inside a big sweet tortilla. That's basically what that is.
Oh my God, they're so good. Look them up online. They're so pretty. Japanese crepes.
Well, other ways that Kazui dismantles perception of Japan. Like Japan, I think, is always seen as, at least for me, like this modern, high-tech, clean city. And when Wendy's running through the train station, you see homeless people.
Yep.
That's it's not that I didn't know that there were homeless people in Japan. Like, of course, there's homeless people everywhere. That's just one of those things that I guess you don't think about. But the first time I saw a homeless person in Japan, it just dawned on me. It just hit me in the face like a ton of bricks. I was like, oh my God, homeless people in Japan.
Very different homeless culture, though.
Very much. Well, you can, and she's running past, so you can't really see it, but you can catch a glimpse of it. But homeless people generally, they create like a little pallet for themselves. But when they step into their pallet, they even take off their shoes. Mm-hmm. They kind of maintain that sense of order about their living space. And the really, really interesting thing to see is what you might call a city of homeless people, like in an abandoned parking lot or something like that. It looks more like just a campground where they've all kind of got their individual, pallets set up, and they're all sitting there like making food or cooking food or something like that on little portable stoves, and they've taken off their shoes outside the pallet. Like it's, you can definitively step into and out of their area because they've established it that way. And it's kind of a sight to behold. It's very, very interesting. So, that kind of, culture.
The point is
definitely
she's showing
exists.
stuff.
But she's showing us things that we don't, I guess, expect to see from the projected ideal Japan.
Like,
right?
we've made this list during this month that we haven't written down, and fuck it, right? But like, we made this list of all these things that we keep saying, number 257 in your Gaijin movie, of stuff that you have to have in a movie about going to Japan, and you've got to have like an LR joke. You've got to be refused taxi service.
Do they do that in this movie?
No, they don't. Never. That movie would never stoop to this.
They don't, do they?
No.
God,
my point is that this movie starts throwing all this stuff in there where you're like, well, that wasn't on my list. Homeless people weren't on my list. Families eating KFC at the dinner table aren't on my list. And it's because the list is the problem.
Right.
The list is the issue.
The fact that there are these things that you can tick off like, well, this is definitely in our movie about Japan kind of thing.
And not that they don't, like, she goes to a shrine, like that kind of stuff exists, but it's so much better in this movie.
Yeah, they get it. This scene in particular that's kind of coming to a close right now, I really love this scene. There are a lot of things in this scene that I really like. So she runs through the station and she misses her last train. She ends up going to this little ramen shop where she meets Hiro, who is our I guess male lead, played by Yutaka Tadokoro, also known as Diamond Yukai, the lead singer of the band The Red Warriors.
Welcome back to Popcorn Poops.
Welcome back to Popcorn Poops. We told you last week to remember the face of the actor who played the director of the Suntory commercial that Bill Murray was in. That is Hiro. That is our character right here. And this is him some 15 years before that movie came out, something like that. So yeah, that's kind of interesting, right?
I think it's super interesting.
Very, very interesting. That scene, though, when he first sees her, all of his friends are kind of talking about her and saying things like she's got nice tits and whatever. And that's another thing I want to come back to. I think his bandmates are kind of shitheads.
Yeah.
I think they're misogynists. I think Hiro's kind of a misogynist too at
Yeah.
first, but he grows.
Yes,
he
he
grows
does.
as a character, definitely.
I don't necessarily think anybody else in this film grows. That's a point I have. And it's not like a negative point like, oh, tisk on this movie. I mean, all I'm asking from you films out there, all of you films and books too, I just want your protagonist to have a dynamic character arc.
Right.
It's really cool if other characters do too.
I mean, Wendy's not terribly dynamic. I understand what you're going to say, but she does learn things. She does come
She's
to
different
understand.
at the end of the movie.
She is different at the end of the movie.
That's a character arc. It's a
Right, that's a
dynamic
character arc. But I think Hiro's the only one who grows and becomes a better person. You know what I mean? I think that's probably what you're getting at, right?
I think she does too.
You think she does?
Yeah, I would argue both of them do.
Okay.
But I would
mean,
argue
yeah.
that they're both the protagonists
okay.
too.
All right. That could be argued. Yes, they are both the protagonist. I don't think that she is any more the main character than he is. This is really, they share this movie, definitely.
But anyways, though, yeah, they both change. I don't expect anybody else in the film to change, though, and I don't think anybody else in the film does. I think that the other people who she's around still see her as the token foreigner.
Right.
By the end of the movie, their opinion doesn't change.
Right.
And I don't criticize the movie for that because not everybody's gonna change in real life
of
either,
course
right?
not.
This is about her and him, and they both change.
I love as when he first sees her and all his bandmates are talking shit and whatever, and he doesn't say it to her, but he's like saying it to her around his bandmates. His delivery of "Hi baby, are you lonesome tonight?" kills me every time. It's so fucking awesome. This scene right here is set on Kappabachidori, which is a street that is famous for restaurant supplies, like kitchen.
Oh, is this where his dad
kitchen
works?
goods
Where
and
his dad
supplies.
makes the
Yeah,
plastic
and this
food?
is it. This is his father right here, who can't possibly be more than 10 years older than him in real life. Let's be real.
I love plastic food so
But yeah, he makes
much.
the wax food, the kind that you see outside of restaurants to give you an idea of what they have on the menu.
It's so beautiful. If you don't know what we're talking about, then totally Google it, image search, because it's so cool.
It is. It's very cool. It's very, very expensive. That's one of the things that I had wished we had kind of splurged on, is to find a really cool piece of wax food to bring back.
They
but
were
we never
really
did.
expensive.
Yeah, really expensive. And you have to have them custom made because they're for your restaurant's dishes. So that's why they tend to be so expensive. But I would have liked a fake beer. That would have been cool. The beer always looks really good. The ramen at that shop was 700 yen in 1988. Has inflation not affected Japan or something in 30 years?
Huh.
Because
That seems high for 1988.
I mean, I've paid 700 yen for a bowl of
Right.
ramen. That seems normal. Especially for an outdoor shop like that. 700 yen seems like that's average. That's
Right, but
average, if
today-
not a little high for that, specifically that kind of shop.
but today,
Yeah.
right? So
1988, it's like, so I don't know. I don't know how inflation has affected Japan much. This exchange here is interesting. Of course, she's in the hostess club, and she's talking to some salarymen, some Japanese businessmen, and they're all introducing themselves in Japanese. And I feel like that rings true to me because after they introduce themselves, I'm sorry, not in Japanese, they introduce themselves in English. And after they introduce themselves in English, they all just cheer and clap and laugh at each other and compliment each other on how good a job they did at their English introduction. And I guarantee you that's probably the only thing they can really say.
Yep.
I feel like a significant portion of my job at the English school that I taught at, especially when teaching adults, was coaching businessmen through their English introduction.
I know.
Without, there's nothing substantive there. It's just say this because this is what you want to say.
This is all you actually want me to teach
Right,
you.
it's a formality
So
kind of
let's
thing.
just say it together now. And we'll go through the textbook for a few months together until you stop coming because you don't want to do it anymore and you just wanted to
Right.
make the effort and show your boss that you tried to take an English class. But we really know the only thing you want out of this class is just to say your introduction very well. That's okay.
So going back to the Love Hotel, they end up at a Love Hotel, and Hiro says he's going to pay. And I love it when they walk into the Love Hotel. She says, "Oh, lots of little hotels. Who stays here?" And Hiro's like, "Oh, everybody. Everybody stays in these little hotels that you pay by the hour or minute even." I feel like she gets mad at him because it's clear once she walks in that there's one bed. It's clear that it's a Love Hotel, and she gets really upset, and she's like, what kind of person do you think I am? You know, I'm not that kind of girl, and blah, 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 and I'm not going to sleep with you. You have to go. I'm going to sleep here. And he gets mad at her, and he's like, but the lady at the desk, it's only 10 minutes.
It's only been 10 minutes. Please don't make me go.
Or I think he says it's only maybe 2 minutes. He's like, it's only 2 minutes. Like, we've only been here 2 minutes. Or maybe he's only paid for 2 minutes.
No, I think it's that they've only been in there for 2 minutes, right, and that he's embarrassed to walk back out. He's embarrassed about have
her to walk out or whatever. And then he gets mad at her because he's like, you said you wanted money.
Yeah, you said, and the way he says it is really upsetting.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you're that.
He sounds like such a child when he says it with the second time.
He feels entitled to the sex that he is kind of purchased from her, or so he feels.
And this immediately sets him up as an unlikable guy. But the thing is that this movie has this impeccable way of creating balance over and over and over again.
Oh yeah.
So responding initially to the other through negativity is incredibly common in actual life, in actual real life. One of the theorists that I was reading talks about how entire civilizations throughout history have been characterized by the sense of alienation and fear we have toward the other, so it's not surprising that we treat them negatively at first. And the thing is, though, is that they both do it. Like, her first impression with Japan is completely negative. It's having no one be able to give her help, having no way to be able to even figure out where she's going or how to stay anywhere. She winds up yelling at someone on the train to keep his hands off of her. That is one of those in your Gaijin movie list ones you've got to hit, where business guy on a train touches a girl or looks at porn.
Right.
Just for the record, 5 years, I definitely did see people looking at porn on the train.
Yes.
No one ever tried to touch my booty. So
no. I think foreigners have been coming to Japan, like loud, outspoken foreigners have been coming to Japan for long enough that maybe it's just known that you don't perform chikan on foreigners because you will be called out.
She's gonna scream at you in the train.
Man, I read this thing the other day where
I'd slap a bitch.
Apparently recently, maybe just a couple of weeks ago, a guy jumped in front of a train to avoid the accusation that he was being yelled at of touching someone on the train.
Okay.
And killed himself.
Yeah, so that's an extreme case, but...
Very extreme. Very extreme.
But anyways, so yeah, this movie did take that one off. Anyways, though, very negative things in the beginning. But the point is that there's balance to this film, and that she's going to prove herself to be just as selfish as he is.
When they go back to the hotel, when she decides... Which is what
this scene is leading to.
Yeah, this is leading... So they're going out on a date. Basically, he meets back up with her at a festival, and I don't know what the hell kind of festival that was. Because
it was some kind of music street festival or something.
I guess. I've never seen a festival like that, but it looks like the kind of shit that they would do at Yoyogi Park. Some craziness, because Yoyogi's always got some crazy shit going on. And it may have been at Yoyogi Park. It kind of looked like Yoyogi Park, but I wasn't sure. So, he follows her around and asks her out on a real date, and she finally, breaks down and says, okay, we'll go out on a real date because you're just crazy enough. I also appreciate that in that scene they acknowledge the fact that he couldn't understand her the other night. And, you have this whole scene in front of the little ramen shop where...
she thinks that he understands
Where she thinks he understands, and all he's saying is sure over and over again. And there's a moment that I wish it meant something that it doesn't mean, that it doesn't intend.
That's so true.
But I think that this would be an even funnier joke. The moment that she says, is it expensive to take a taxi back to Itabashi? And he says, sure. She goes, shit. And...
What she's really doing is thinking that he understands her and saying shit because she doesn't have money.
Right. But at this point, he said sure maybe half a dozen times. And in my mind, I feel
me.
like the joke is he says sure for the 6th time or the 5th or 6th time, and she realizes he doesn't understand what I'm saying, and she says shit because he doesn't understand what
he
she's
doesn't know
saying.
what I'm saying.
Damn it.
Unfortunately, that's not what happened, and it wouldn't make sense logically for the progression of events in the story. But anyways, though, that's how I read it on the first viewing.
It's a good thing she's got Itabashi written down, because that's very easy to, especially to a Westerner, that's very easy to confuse with Idabashi. Itabashi and Idabashi are very different places in Tokyo, and if you think you're going to one but you go to the other, then you're kind of fucked, especially if you're traveling late.
But anyways, they go to that love hotel, and, there's been this miscommunication. Not that he's not a shithead for thinking that that's what was going to happen.
Oh, yeah. It's a dick move.
Yeah, it's a super dick move. And there's definitely a part of me that's sitting there going, does he think she's a prostitute? Like, does he think that this is how she normally gets money and hotels? But anyways, though, all of that is okay because he changes as a character, number one, but number two, because she's equally selfish. Like, you watch this scene of them on their date,
my God.
During this whole time, she just talks his head off, and she even talks about how she stole her boyfriend's rent money, which is a really selfish, shitty thing to do. Whether or not he was a jerk, and she just talks and talks and talks to Hiro, and even tells him what does she say, that he's a great listener, or that he's great to talk to?
You're great to talk to. Has anyone ever told you that? And of course his answer is sure maybe.
But the point is that he doesn't understand her, and he's not talking at all.
No, he's not. He's just letting these words bounce off him, because he doesn't really, like, he maybe catches every third word. I can't guess what his English ability
his
is.
English
but it's
ability
not
at the end of
great.
the movie is a little less believable than I
right. Are we
from this level? It's sort of hard to gauge.
I feel like we're supposed to believe that he learns more English by the end of the movie, but I don't think that it's conveyed very well, that progression of language acquisition, and she doesn't really learn anything as far as Japanese goes.
But anyways, which is part of her character, of her not actually making an effort to integrate into the society, because all of that is still while she is selfishly thinking of herself as not the other.
Right.
But anyways, though, her telling him that, that he's a great guy to talk to when she's just talking to herself is a really selfish kind of thing to do. It's the kind of thing that someone who doesn't realize that they're not really being a good human being in that moment might do. And in this scene, she's going to do something equally selfish. They're back in a love hotel, this time by her choice. And they're back in the love hotel, and she's convincing him right now to let her go take a bath first.
And this is the moment, like, because I feel like she was being genuine before. Like that's what my impression was when they go back to a little ramen shop, and she says, I want to go to a hotel, and he's like, really? You want to go to a hotel with me? Like, you've come around to this? You want to have sex? You want to go have sex with me?
Okay.
And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay. I guess she's come around to him in a night, and that's fine. To each their own. And then we get to the hotel, and she's like, I'd really like to take a long bath. Because
at the Mickey house, at her hostel, we have to pay for it.
Right, we have to pay for it, and she knows that he's paying by the hour at this place.
Or maybe by the minute. I don't know how this hotel works.
But she is using him. Mm-hmm. And when she says that, you're like, oh, she is using him for this opportunity to take a bath and kind of relax. And I guess she's willing to give up sex for it, because she does end up having sex with him.
Right.
But it doesn't paint her in a very, and you were talking about balance earlier, it doesn't paint her in a very good light. Mm-hmm. Just like the first time they go to a love hotel, it doesn't paint him in a very good light, thinking that he could just pay for a love hotel and she would have sex with him.
Right.
Right.
So again, balance. This movie knows how to balance out its characters and not make anybody the victim, because they're both kind of shitty people at this point. He is super awkward in this scene when he tries to have sex with her, and he is like all over her. It's really awkward.
I love it.
It's great, but it's super awkward.
Wonderfully awkward, because I don't know, you just get the feeling that this guy who says things like, I'm a rock and roll man.
He says that repeatedly.
He said, and specifically in the scene right before this, when they're back at the ramen shop, he says, just like as though there was nothing else to say in that moment, he says, I'm a rock and roll man. And her just kind of patronizing smiles, and she's like, I know. I know you're a rock and roll man. And I think it's really clear that he doesn't have a lot of life experience. He doesn't have a lot of experience with women. He doesn't have a lot of experience.
I don't necessarily believe he's a virgin or anything.
No, I mean, there's nothing to make you believe that he is. It's just, it's clear that he's not, he's no Don Juan, right?
Right. I mean, he wears his socks in this scene when they have sex.
Like, he's got his little tighty whities and his little red socks, and he's just all over her, just like kissing her like crazy, and it's really weird and really awkward, and she has to tell him. And it's very
clear she's not turned on by it.
She's not into it. And she has to tell him, listen, I'm down with this, but you gotta slow the fuck down, bro. Like, this is a real scene of awkward intimacy between two people who have never seen each other's ugly bits, This will be the first, right? So, yeah, I do kind of love this scene. It's interesting how, like, there are three scenes in love hotels in this movie, and the first scene, she gets painted as kind of a shitty person, or he gets painted as kind of a shitty person. The second one, she gets painted as kind of a shitty person, and the last one is probably my favorite scene in the entire movie, and it's when they discover what they have together,
right,
and what their relationship actually means, and how they can cross these, cultural barriers and come together and do something really meaningful, or so they think at the time.
Right. It's pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty nice.
It is really cool. It's like these interesting little bookmarks in the chapters of this movie that I think work really well. And like, there's this, he's now talking to the band. He's talking to the band about her, and she can't, of course, she's in the room with them, but she can't understand what he's saying to them. And I think it's interesting because I think that, especially with this conversation and conversations like it throughout the movie, Lost in Translation is maybe a much better title for this movie.
Yeah, probably.
Because, like, for example, Wendy says that her ex-boyfriend once opened for Billy Idol, and now that has suddenly become Wendy once sang with Billy Idol when Hiro translates it for his bandmates, trying to impress them with, her I guess, cred as a rock and roller, So I think that's interesting how that kind of changes. And I think that that's a microcosm for the whole movie and how things kind of get lost in translation, right? So I think that actually could have been a better title for this movie than Tokyo Pop, because it's...
And the callback.
They try to make Tokyo Pop work like as a title. Like, there's a line in the movie, and we'll talk about it when we get there. But it doesn't work like I think the movie wants it to work. I'll say.
No, I don't think so either.
What have we missed? Oh, there's a moment where Wendy says, and this is just another one of those things that's just thrown in there, kind of peppered throughout the movie, different little truisms about living in Japan and learning things. She says, no street names, no addresses. What kind of city is this?
Right. What kind of city is it?
My fucking God. It took me forever to figure out how addresses work in Japan.
I don't think I know. I don't think I understand still.
I don't understand how the numbering system itself works, but I do understand like the fact that
like the communities and stuff, like the way communities are named. Yeah, exactly.
Like the way the numbers work with dashes, like it's basically larger chunks of the city or larger chunks of a block divided up into smaller chunks of a block until you have a specific house. So if like your house number in a big city is like 1413-2, it's like 14 is the number of the big block, 13 is the number of a smaller block within that block, and 2 is the number of your house within that smaller block within the bigger block.
But you try and explain this to somebody who's trying to get to your house, and what you're going to do is, well, okay, let me put it this way. The first time I told a Japanese friend that I was driving in Japan and did not have GPS, they were like, how the hell do you go anywhere?
Exactly. This is a Japanese friend, by the way. Someone who's grown up in Japan and doesn't understand how we got around.
How I could get anywhere. Yes. And the answer was because I'd memorized everywhere that I needed to go. Eventually, I would use my phone for GPS, and it was fine. But But yeah, without the GPS on my phone, if I was trying to get to a new place that I hadn't been to, we're talking maps that people drew for you and directions like, okay, you're going to see a really big rock, that kind of shit, because there are not street names. So
so he takes her on a shrine date, which is I guess a Gaijin movie rule thing, right? They meet at the Hachiko statue next to Shibuya Station, which is of course, the statue of a little dog that was kind of memorialized because it famously would wait next to the station every single day for its owner to come home. And it's kind of like one of the most famous dogs ever. Symbolically, does that make Hiro just like a puppy dog at the heels of Wendy?
I think you're stretching a bit there.
I'm stretching a little bit. But.
They just had one of my favorite exchanges in the whole movie where they're walking around the shrine and she says to him, "You come here all the time?" And he says, "Oh, this is the first time." And she's like, "No, get out of here, really?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm a rock and roller." And she's like, "This is what I always thought Japan was like. It's cool." And this is one of those perfect moments in this movie where, again, Kazui is breaking down those preconceptions. And she's saying, no, these are tourist places,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Shrines are tourist places.
Yeah.
When there's that scene in Lost in Translation where her husband is talking to somebody and there's this like little clip of a conversation at the bar and he's like, "So it's mostly Buddhist here, right?" And someone's like, "Yeah, it's mostly Buddhist." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? It's like on the surface? Like what?
Yeah.
What like?"
What would the equivalent be like? Well, here's a good example. It might be a good example. We grew up really close to the Hermitage, the home of Andrew Jackson. I've only been there like once.
I went a bunch when I was a kid because...
Oh, well, shit. That's a terrible example.
I lived across the street from it. We could almost walk to it.
Yeah, I only went once. Well, I grew
really
up very, very close to it as well, and I only went once. It was just one of those things that's like, yeah, there's the Hermitage. That's where, Andrew Jackson lived. That's where he's buried.
Cheap,
whatever.
So my mom would take us there when we had nothing to do in the summer.
Okay, I see.
But anyways, no, though, it's like, yeah, it's the same kind of thing. It's just, this is generally touristy stuff. And not that it's all touristy. Don't get me wrong. Like, they go to their shrines on New Year's. It's packed. It's hard to move for about 3-4 days to a week at a popular shrine after New Year's. But the concept of like Japanese people all participating in this traditional stuff is ludicrous.
I could not for the life of me figure out what shrine they were at. I looked it up and...
well, unfortunately, there aren't a bunch of people on the internet giving you the deets about this movie.
About Tokyo Pop. Well, no, I went because, I assumed since they met at Shibuya Station that it would be a shrine near Shibuya. So I looked at pictures of all the shrines near Shibuya. I could not find one that looked like the shrine they were at. So if you happen to know what shrine that was, let us know because I'm interested. But anyway, there's a guitar lick in this movie that's part of the original score, and it pops up a couple of times. The first time we hear it is at the shrine. It's a very kind of calm, easy listening kind of guitar lick, and it sounds a lot like The Way We Were by Barbra Streisand. And every time I hear it, I'm just like, is that the Way We Were? Is that what that is? Robert Redford? What do you...
So one of the things I want to talk about here is, and it goes along with that shrine scene, is that one of the reasons this film works so seamlessly in if you listen to previous episodes, then my whole thesis is about having an authentic engagement with the other, where you recognize that you are the other as well as they are, and it's through that contradiction, through that dialectical contradiction where you're exchanging this experience that meaning is observed. And I'm not some crazy asshole like just pulling this out of thin air. This is philosophy, this is lit theory, this is a lot of stuff that's out there, and I don't feel like referencing all my quotes, but Bakhtin, Levinas, de Beauvoir, like you just go look up people and you're going to find this Hegel even. But so my idea is that meaning is created. It's not my idea, but what I put into this is meaning is created through an authentic engagement of the other, and self-identity in these movies is created through that authentic engagement, and that's what these movies are going for, that they want their characters to go to a foreign country and find themselves in the land of the not white.
Exactly. And in Hiro's case, here's the thing. In Hiro's case, he has struggled, and it's obvious from the scene where they're in the okonomiyaki shop. He talks about himself. Like, she asks him, why don't you talk about yourself? He's like, well, Japanese don't really talk about themselves. She says, I want to know, why are you a rock and roller? Why do you want to be a rock and roller? And he said that when he was in school, he was made fun of because he wasn't a real Tokyo boy, that he grew up in Yamagata, which is like the countryside and stuff like that. So in order to make himself stand out and be different, he decided that he wanted to sing like Mick Jagger. So he started singing like Mick Jagger, and he mentioned some other people. Also, Frank Sinatra. I don't know if Gaijin movie rule, Frank Sinatra references.
I guess so.
That's a thing, maybe. But
maybe it's just really, somebody they know. So,
but the thing, the interesting thing, or one of the many interesting things about Hiro's character arc, is that he struggles with his own cultural identity,
right?
And he's trying to follow his dreams to do something that is so Western, or that seems so Western. And his engagement with the other through his pursuit of his dreams is not genuine. It's him copying something that he's seen and heard over and over again, and it's not genuine until he meets Wendy, and he meets an actual foreigner. Now, I have to say something about this scene. This scene right here features this group right here that's on screen for like less than a minute. This is ex-Japan. Okay, it's a big, huge group from like the 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm. Very famous.
Very famous. Apparently, what little following this movie has online is all about that ex-Japan cameo.
Yeah.
It's all about it.
So if you look on IMDb or something, that's what you're going to find in the comments section.
In fact, one of the comments that we received on Twitter, one of the only comments that we received on Twitter when we announced this movie was that, oh, it's that movie that has the ex-Japan cameo. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, I'm going to be honest. I know ex-Japan when I was a fledgling weeb. Of course, you get into ex-Japan, you have your ex-Japan phase, and you listen to like the one album that you can find on Napster or whatever.
Oh, man.
Or you patch together an album of your own just from whatever you can find on LimeWire or whatever the fuck. And you have that phase. But I was never like way into ex-Japan, and when I heard that that's what this movie's kind of known for, at least among Westerners, I had to look up where in the movie they were. Oh yeah,
I did too. Because I didn't realize it until I was doing research for it, and then I was like, "Oh, ex-Japan."
I think they pop up later too. I think they pop up for a second.
Well, isn't she with them right now singing? Isn't that who she's playing with right now? I don't know.
Is she? She might be.
I don't remember.
I feel like they walk in, like there's a scene where Dodo walks in, the music producer,
and maybe they're just in the background. Oh no, she's not playing with them.
This is a different group.
Yeah, she's playing with someone else. Anyways, so going back to what we were talking about, though, the reason why I feel like this movie makes it look so easy to achieve this self-identity of these characters through interaction with the others. One of the reasons that I think it comes off so easy in this film is because both of these characters are others in their own culture coming into the movie.
Yeah.
Before the movie even starts.
I just have to say, Wendy's doing okay for herself if the first gig that she booked is at Loft in Shinjuku. It's a very important music venue. If that's her first gig, she's okay. Go ahead, sorry.
So Hiro's got the tough guy rocker attire. He's courageous with his English language, interest in American stuff, which is not weird in Japan, but to the extent that he's doing it, he's slightly othering himself. And he's got these other tics about him that put him against typical Japanese societal norms. At least on the surface, and certainly in his own perception of himself. I mean, him constantly asserting, "I'm a rock and roll man," over and over.
I know.
He is by no means typically a typical Japanese citizen. And then Wendy, she dresses alternatively. She's interested in rock music, and it's perhaps less shocking in American culture than it would be in Japanese culture at this time. And though she perhaps considers herself kind of countercultural, her style is kind of like today's cliche standard exemplification of 1980s apparel. But it's more than just the fact that she dresses alternative or whatever. It's also her disenchantment with America.
Yeah.
It's the fact that she is kind of over it, and she feels sort of abrasive in her society, and she wants to leave. And the only other American woman in America that she interacts with is identified by countering that and being like, why do you want to go? Where a friend's like, why Japan? And Wendy's like, this city sucks. And what's wrong with LA? LA sucks too. Like, she wants to go, and her disenchantment distances her from her culture.
Yeah. I don't know. Does Hiro have any kind of disenchantment? I mean, I feel like
disenchantment with Japan. Well, I was just telling you about how he, socially he's not the norm. Like, he's more interested in America than he is in interested.
But it's not genuine. I want to talk about this. I know you
want to mention
this. This is my favorite scene in the entire movie. They're in a love hotel again. He decides that he wants to sing with Wendy. So they're naked in bed. He pulls out his guitar and they sing Natural Woman, which is just a weird, like, it's a weird choice. Like, it's a weird song to sing, but they start singing these harmonies and it just kind of clicks. And we go right from this scene into a scene of them practicing with the band, this same song. And I don't know, it's just a really sweet scene. I really like it. This is the moment when it clicks, and I'm just like, whereas before they were kind of maybe using each other, but now they realize that they can really come together and do something special together.
Yes, no, I agree.
And she doesn't
even if I think it's kind of weird and I'm not totally into the songs that they sing in this movie, that's fine.
Yeah, the one that they get famous for is also weird because it's a cover. They end up doing "Do You Believe in Magic?" Is that it? Yeah. They end up doing "Do You Believe in Magic?" and that's the one that they become famous for in Japan. And it's, I don't know. Why?
Well, I mean, why is any song famous in Japan? That's super famous in Japan. There would be times where I'd be driving and I would hear like whatever songs made it over from our top 50 charts. And I'd be like, why the hell this song? Like, of all the other songs, why this one? It was so weird what like passes through that net and what doesn't.
Yeah. So, I mean, the interesting thing about this too is that she has asserted from the beginning she doesn't want to sing backup. She is not a backup singer. She wants to have her own band. She's been backup singer for her boyfriend's bands before, and she's tired of that shit. And she is not a backup singer in this band.
No.
Her and Hiro, just like in this movie, they're basically co-headlining. They're both lead singers. They sing together. This is their band. Like
I said, balance.
And I think it's also a great metaphor for cross-culturalism. Once they work out exactly what makes their relationship special and not just them using each other for sex or a place to take a bath or a place to sleep or a cool foreign girlfriend or a cool Japanese rock and roll man or whatever the hell they're using each other for. I think that works on that thematic level, So yeah, that's why the Natural Woman scene is my favorite scene in the movie. I also want to say that Dunkin' Donuts is bullshit. Dunkin' Donuts my ass. They would be at a Mr. Donut.
Oh yeah, they'd be at a Mr. Donut.
They'd totally be at a Mr. Donut.
They are in Tokyo though. I mean, there are a couple Dunkin' Donuts in Tokyo.
I guess there are, but there's Krispy Kreme there
now
too.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of is Krispy Kreme.
Krispy Kreme has come up. I don't know if I ever saw a Dunkin' Donuts.
I don't know if I did either. I'm thinking of the Krispy Kreme in Shinjuku.
There is
right?
one in Shinjuku near Tokyo Hands. Yeah,
that's the one I'm thinking of. But why would you go to an American donut shop when you can have Mr. Donut?
And where you can when you can have like really dried, gross donuts that you have to dip in coffee or you'll choke to death on the desert.
No, oh my God, I love Mr. Donut. You can back up off it.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, I don't really eat donuts at all, but
Mr. Donut is a good option if you want not a super crazy sweet donut. Like
Right,
if you want a semi-sweet donut.
That's why I like Mr. Donut.
Because you can't really get semi-sweet donuts at Krispy Kreme. I mean, that's true here, Japan, anywhere. Krispy Kreme is Krispy Kreme. It's going to give you diabetes. But, yeah. His bandmates. We've said this before. They're shitheads. They're real shitheads.
Mm-hmm.
They are at auditions, or they were at auditions, and during the scene in auditions, you know, they keep talking about her as a gaijin. They need a gaijin. They need a gimmick. They need some kind of act that's going to propel them because it's unique and weird and doesn't have anything to do with their skill as musician. It's just to get them attention. And I think that kind of firmly makes, and especially the way they talk about her in reference to Hiro, you know, he's saying things like, you know, I'm learning stuff about this woman. Foreigners are complicated. And it's not that foreigners are complicated. It's that being in a relationship is complicated because you're dealing with another psyche. You're dealing with another human being.
And you've just added another level to it by having cultural differences.
So I think that his bandmates are pretty staunch misogynists. They're pretty staunch ethnocentrists. And I think that Hiro is growing out of that. I think that's part of his character. And in that scene where they're at the auditions and they're told that the auditions are over before they've even gotten a chance to play, one of his bandmates, it's translated in subtitles, it says,
"Oh yeah,
pay more attention to her." That's what it says. Maybe you need to pay more attention to her. But he's clearly just saying fuck her. Like fuck like 3 times. He just fuck you. Like you just need to fuck her more.
Right, yeah.
Which is...
It's kind of interesting that doesn't get translated as what it actually is. There are some, they're not mistranslations, but convenient translations in this film.
Yeah, diplomatic translations.
Perhaps.
Like we talked about with the Yojster from Mr. Baseball. Yeah, the movie kind of does that for us. I did know this movie is rated R, but I've noticed that it did take out some of, like Wendy has a few lines where she says fuck, and they censored it. Like you can see her say fuck, like in the scene where they're about to play at the wrestling match, right? She gets upset at Hiro and she's about to leave and she says fuck like a couple of times in a row and they censor it every time. Like they change it to a different word. But you can clearly see her saying it. So I don't know. It's kind of weird. I'm not sure why they did that if the movie's already rated R. Can
you like say fuck too many times and then get the next rating?
No, it's really hard to get an NC-17. I don't know. Did the NC-17 exist in '88? It may have still been X. But I don't know if you can get a higher rating than R just for language. The only filmmaker that I think has pushed that boundary and maybe gotten the NC-17 for language was Kevin Smith for Clerks. Maybe. But that also could
chill out.
That also could have been about the dead guy erection in that movie. I don't know.
So what we've got going on in the film right now is that Dota-san, who is a manager,
big time record manager, band manager, producer.
Guy.
Not sure exactly what he does, but he's important and he's a star maker. That's what they say. Right.
And Hiro and his band have been trying to get an audition with him to play at this music festival, and they've been failing. And she just keeps telling him, you've got to just try harder. You've just got to do it. You've just got to go in and do it. And they try some pretty creative stuff to their credit. None of it works.
Yeah. Like the singing gorilla gram.
Right.
Which is kind of funny.
And then what Wendy winds up doing is she just walks into the office as Wendy,
just to search herself.
Wendy office, or in her Wendy outfit.
Yeah.
And is just like, listen to my tape, and puts it on his desk, and he's like, okay. I think the point the movie is making, though, that Wendy still doesn't get at this point is that it would not have worked if they had done it. That it only works because she did it because she's a Westerner.
I get that, but what makes Wendy think that Dodo won't just throw the tape away as soon as she leaves, like he did with every single other time that they got a tape in his hands?
I think it's the interaction. It's the way he interacts with her. He takes her seriously because she's a foreigner.
Yeah, and they do kind of establish Doda as a guy who thinks he's too cool for school because he's a Japanese dude that knows how to speak English, and that's all he speaks. He speaks English to the Japanese people that he works with, even though they clearly don't. Mm-hmm. That's just what he does. He just speaks English all the time. So yeah. Anyway.
Oh, so they're at their first gig, and I want to talk about how the Japanese being de-essentialized in this part of the movie, because Wendy is still naive at this point in realizing that she is also the other. She doesn't realize it until very close to the end of the movie.
And this is a very important scene for understanding the cultural divide between Wendy and Hiro that's still there, despite what they've kind of accomplished in their relationship and professionally.
So they're at the first gig that they've gotten through this Dota-san guy who she got the tape to. Do you want to explain what the first gig is? It's like
So they're at a wrestling match, and basically the way Hiro explains it is that in the old days, professional wrestlers, and this is like pro wrestling, like WWE, like not real. It's not like athletic wrestling.
Right.
Or competitive wrestling, or whatever you want to call it. And he said in the old days, wrestlers used to sing as like their own introduction act, or whatever, the opening act. But now they do it differently, and bands will play for wrestlers. But the bands that play for wrestlers don't get taken seriously.
Right.
So Hiro doesn't want to play, even though they're going to be on TV. And that's the thing that Wendy can't understand, is they're going to be on national television. This is exposure. It doesn't matter if it's on a wrestling match or not. So, she can't understand that. And the thing he keeps saying is, this is not how it's done. People don't do it this way. We don't do it this way. They won't invite us to music festivals. We won't get taken seriously. We won't become famous. We'll just be a band that plays on wrestling matches.
And then they have this fantastic exchange, I keep saying that, where he says, you don't understand about Japan. And he said
not
this
the only time he said
a few
that, right.
times leading up to this during various different scenes. You don't understand about Japan. And she finally yells back, why? Because I'm not Japanese. And later in the conversation, he's going to say, nobody does it this way. And she says, just because nobody does it this way means that we can't. Why do you have to do what everybody else does? Why do you have to be so Japanese about everything? And she just explodes on him. And it winds up that their fight gets pictures taken that get put in a magazine. And that's why they are famous, I guess.
I don't know. So I can't say for sure what made them famous, because they were fighting backstage with, and a wrestler walks in, and a picture was taken of Wendy and Hiro and the wrestler as like this commotion is happening. And then that picture gets published in a magazine, and her boss at the hostess clubs, opens a magazine and goes, Wendy, you're famous. And Wendy's like, that's famous in Japan? And she's like, yeah, in Japan, this is famous. And she's like, okay, well, I quit then, which is really strange to me.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, they're now singing Do You Believe in Magic? And that's their big hit.
And there's also a weird
thing. They are actually famous.
There's a weird thing that happens later at a bar in a great scene, which is probably my favorite scene in the movie.
Very good, yeah.
But when that scene happens, there's going to be a slip up that we won't talk about then, because we'll be talking about other stuff. But one of the guys references her band and is like, in that band with the wrestler. And I don't know if people are confused and think that Hiro is a wrestler, or they're just confused. And there's something that gets... I feel like there's a deleted scene in this movie or something that didn't make it through. There is some continuity for me that is a problem. I'm not quite sure what it is that happened, but there's something that gets mixed up about why they're famous and what people think they are.
Right.
But you don't really need it for the rest of the movie. All that matters is that they are famous.
That they've made it, right?
Right,
and
that's
the thing. That's the thing that you've got to get over, is they got what they wanted. They are now singing, and they've got gigs, and people know who they are. And she got what she wanted, and he got what he wanted. He's a real rock and roller, and she's successful singing, not back up in a band,
Well, and the thing is that I also wanted to mention is that Hiro, this is where he starts to really change, because what's happened for Hiro is he believes that he's already different. He believes he's subversive, that he's subverting his culture, that he's going against it and stuff. The scene where he takes Wendy to the shrine.
This shot right here was our hint, and no one got it. Because, of course, they didn't.
Yeah. The scene where he takes Wendy to the shrine, his mom is like, "Oh my gosh, I knew you were Japanese." And
yes, what she actually says, it's translated as something else, but what she actually says is, "Hiro, you're Japanese after all. You know, you should always know Japanese things before American things. That's important to do." You know,
so like Hiro has been believing that he is super subversive and a rebel and whatever, and then Wendy sort of points out to him that even as a rebel, he is a product of his own culture.
Oh yeah, because
she points that out to him and says, "Why do you have to be so Japanese all the time?" And that's being said to a guy that thinks he's really super not Japanese.
Yeah.
And so, to give you just a touch of theory, but Foucault, he talks about in his Discipline and Punish, he talks about the claim that nothing is outside the system of power, including the authorities and the rebels. So even actions believed to be in direct rebellion against the system of power actually play a necessary part in its continuing existence. Mm-hmm. Hiro thinks he's a rebel, but he's just part of Japanese culture.
It's all part of the plan.
And he realizes that in that moment with Wendy, I think. I think it's that moment where he realizes, wait a minute, I guess I am really super Japanese. And it's because of his realizing that I think he's able to start making an authentic engagement with her, that he's actually able to change as a character.
I like this moment too. Like, apparently they must be very successful because they've got a really nice studio apartment in Tokyo. And this place would be fucking hella expensive.
Yeah, so they must be making money.
And he just kind of drinks it all in, and he stands there, and, you know, she's like, "Oh, it's a nice place. I really like this. Like, what do you think?" And he's just like, "I think I'm really lucky." And it's a real genuine moment with him where he's like, most Japanese guys don't get their first apartment until they're married like that. And that is typically how it works. They tend to live with their families until they marry
women
off.
too. I mean,
yeah,
most
women
people.
too. Yeah, just most people in general. Just culturally, that's how it works. So I think that's a really nice moment of him just feeling like, wow, I've really made it because this is an unusual situation. And for her, it's just like, oh, well, we're successful. Of course we have an apartment.
And for her, I'm sure it's also like, you know, oh, this is the first time you've lived outside of your parents' house?
Really?
Like, really? So anyways, though, Hiro comes to term with the other's perception of himself, and that eventually recognizing both his Japaneseness as well as his otherness, and that's how he changes. But for Wendy, it's going to be a bit different, and I think more obvious too, because it's more. Even though I believe they are both the protagonist, I believe that we're just innately a little closer to Wendy because we're Americans watching this film for the most part.
I do want to
Japanese TV.
So, well, Gaijin movie rule.
Yeah.
I would like to make an addendum because I said this before on previous episodes. Gaijin movie rule, watching Japanese TV. Here's the addendum, because in 3 out of the 4 movies we've watched, it's not just watching TV, it's seeing yourself on Japanese TV.
You're very right.
Bob Harris does, Bill Murray's character does in Lost in Translation. Mr. Baseball sees his commercial when he watches TV. And Hiro, although it was Hiro watching TV in this movie, he sees Wendy on TV, which I feel is like the same kind of thing. So it's not just watching TV in Japan, it's seeing yourself on Japanese TV. Did it happen in the Namen Girl? No.
I don't know. Well, she didn't see herself, definitely.
Did she watch Japanese TV?
I don't think so.
I don't think she did.
Not that I ever saw.
Okay. I like this scene. It's really obviously this whole movie is obviously really shot on a budget. A lot of this is shot guerrilla style. If you go back through this and you watch some of the scenes that are in like crowded train stations and stuff like that, there are a bunch of people looking directly into the camera because they didn't get permits to shoot here. Those aren't extras. Those are just people that were actually going through the train station and seeing this big ass film camera shooting something.
Right.
And they look right into the camera. So And then like you look at a scene like this where they're walking down the pier and there are these long shadows behind them because obviously there's a big like sunlight, a big light, an electric light shining on them to light this scene, and that's all they had, and someone's just carrying it. But I don't know, like I think that this is you don't ever hear a lot about indie film pre-1990. Pre the VHS era filmmakers, the Sundance filmmakers that made a big splash, like Quentin Tarantino and Steven Soderbergh and Kevin Smith and Robert Rodriguez. Indie film was not really it wasn't really a concept until those guys came along, and then it was like, oh, indie film is a thing, right?
Right.
Richard Linklater's another guy. But I think this is a really good example of what indie film was pre-1990,
Okay.
So, yeah, and it's not like this is the only one.
I like this scene because I feel like this is an example of them authentically engaging with each other, like really finding each other and finding themselves because of that. She says to him, they could play something real like your song, that the band could play something real like your song. And he says, I don't think so. Why? And he just says, you understand? And she nods.
He's like, yeah, I understand.
He doesn't even have to explain it anymore.
I get it too. I do still think it's kind of weird in the first place that they got famous off of a cover of a Lovin' Spoonful song. Like who gets famous off of a Well, I guess Alien Ant Farm can relate. But I don't know. I don't think there's a whole lot of people out there, a whole lot of artists that can say, I was a one-hit wonder and my one hit was a cover of a song that was already famous.
To be completely honest, neither of us were super into Japanese music.
No, not super.
Like we had some bands and stuff some artists that we liked, and I listened to the radio pretty regularly. But anyways, though, maybe it's just a Japan thing. I mean, that could be it. It could be maybe that's a way to get famous in Japan is to do covers. Well, I can recall, I can't remember her name, but I can recall some Japanese covers of American songs that had people really famous while we were there. I can't remember her name, but there's a girl I can picture, and she sang it in Japanese too.
Right. I do actually seem to remember in the time we were there
It was like an R&B song.
Oh man, what was it?
I can't remember.
There was another one by a guy that was there.
Yes, there was.
In the last year that we were there.
So it may just be a Japan thing, though.
It could be. We just missed a really cool scene.
This has got to be New Year's.
Between Hiro and his grandfather fishing on the pier, and he listens to Hiro's song, and he says that he doesn't know a lot about rock and roll, but he thinks it's a very nice song, which is a very nice thing to say. But I really like that scene. The grandfather mentions an artist that he was into. You mentioned earlier that he was in, I even said his big Western indulgence of his youth was being a fan of Boogie Woogie. He mentions an artist by the name of Shizuko Kasagi, who was known in her time as Boogie no Jo, or the Queen of the Boogie Woogie. And I looked up some of her songs, and like half the songs I looked up had Boogie Woogie in the title, like Tokyo Boogie Woogie and stuff like that. But I feel like, you talked about, you feel like we missed a scene like between when they weren't famous and when they became famous. Mm-hmm. I feel like we also missed a scene where she finally listens to his song. Because I get the impression that the song that she listens to at the end is a new song that she's never heard before, but I also feel like she's already heard the song that his song, the one that he wrote, and we don't know that she's heard it, but she acts as though she has already heard it. I don't know. Well, he even says to his grandfather that his girlfriend likes the song.
There is a bit here from pretty much from like the wrestling match on. There is a bit that I think gets confused. I think
this clapping thing.
Yeah.
I've done that so many times at drinking parties. It's like the hip hip hooray of Japan.
Okay. I can see the connection.
3 cheers for this douchebag. Hip hip hooray. So
but
instead of that,
like
they do
clap
the
thing.
Clap, 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 clap. Hoi.
Things you do while you're drinking in Japan. There are lots of them. That's one of them.
You do. You do lots of things.
Um,
Insult your boss with no repercussions. That's not as you can't. Within reason, but.
Anyways, what was I trying to get to? There's some stuff that I think gets missed. Oh, here's the scene. This is the scene that this is my favorite scene in the movie. So, and the reason it's my favorite scene is because this is the scene where I'm like, oh my God,
okay,
I
so
know.
set the scene. What's going on?
Okay, so she's in a bar, and it's not a foreigner bar like in Mr. Baseball.
With Coors beer.
She's just in a
also
regular bar, and she's with a foreigner friend of hers. Where is he from? Maybe the UK or
I think he's from Australia.
And this other guy shows up. Another foreigner comes up who's from the States, and she asks him what he's listening to,
and he says John Cryer, who played Ducky in Pretty in Pink and was also he was one of the 2.5 Men fraction, and he's never sang anything ever except for I think he was in maybe some musicals or something at some point. So I don't know what he's talking about when he says he's listening to the new John Cryer, and she's like, John Cryer's singing now?
But this guy, Curtis is his name. He's fresh off the boat, right? Like he's a newbie in Tokyo. I don't know if he's come to visit or if he lives there.
Oh my God, I thought you said newbie in Tokyo. I thought you said he's a Nubian and it's a black guy, and I was going to be like, Jessica, what are you talking about? How do you know where he's...
And so he's telling her about new music, and there's a new Tina Turner, and she's like, John Cryer is singing now and whatever. And she's looking, she tells the guy that she was looking at the top 10 singles in the US, and she didn't even know a single artist. And I'm just like, oh my God, yes. She's been there, for me to gauge that, she's at least been there a year or so at this point.
Yeah, it's fucking real.
It's so real.
I remember, and you would do the same thing. I remember looking at billboards just to see who was in the top 40 and feeling like I didn't know the music or I wasn't in touch with the culture. And we're talking about, we live, and when we were in Japan, totally, we're in the age of the internet, completely. You know, it's not like we didn't have Skype and all that, FaceTime and all this shit. It's not like we couldn't
talk to my mom every weekend.
Exactly. Like I can't imagine. If I felt that way in 2010 to 2015, I can't imagine what it was like in 1988.
Yeah.
Can't even imagine.
Well, it's like my grandma talking about when she was living abroad in France and Italy and stuff, and her talking about how just sending letters. And I'm just like, oh my God, holy shit, the isolation.
But then there's a moment in that scene too. I don't know what's happening in this scene. It looks like this
It's
Shinto...
a ritual for cars, for either throwing them away or getting new cars or something. I've heard something about it before, but but I don't know.
Well, because I've seen like the Shinto priests with the brooms, like the ceremonial brooms. And
he's blessing it for some reason.
Blessing it or something. I've seen that in a movie where they perform an exorcism, like a Japanese exorcism, the broom used. So when I saw that, I was like, is he exercising the car?
It could be there's a problem with the car or something.
I guess
I don't know. But I've heard of stuff like that before.
But there is a moment in that scene in the club where there's a feeling when that guy says, wow, you live here. And it's that moment when someone is so amazed that you live in Japan and just think that you're so in tune with things Japanese, but you still feel so outside of the loop.
There's a sadness that comes with it.
Because you feel like you still feel like an outsider in Japan, but you feel outside of the loop of your own culture. You feel caught in between cultures. It's like you don't belong anywhere. And not to say that I didn't love my time in Japan, but the feeling that thing gets across is absolutely perfect.
It's so perfect.
Oh my God, this shot right here. Her moving against the grain of people, her blonde hair standing out amidst a sea of black hair. Just visually
And
Stunning.
all following this scene that we're talking about, like all this stuff. And we had like the shrine shot. I don't remember if she was at a shrine or a temple, and I don't want to talk out my ass. But like we see her like looking at some traditional Japanese stuff and whatever. But I feel like it's earned by this point in the movie.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying I didn't spend my own fair share of time at shrines and temples, because I absolutely did. Why the hell wouldn't you?
I mean, it is kind of a gaijin movie rule thing to go to a temple or a shrine for clarity.
But if you don't while you're in Japan, you're pretty stupid to not go see them.
You got to give it all a shot, right?
But anyways, though, yeah, it's that moment of, I will never forget the first time we visited Japan, and we were in college, and we stayed for like a month, and we went into some shop, and we were talking to some people who happened to speak English, a very little shop, and they thought that we were English teachers and that we lived there. And I remember that feeling so much, because I'm just like, how cool would it be to live in Japan?
How cool would it be to be the
person
to be able to say yes
that lives in Japan, and then to know both sides of that and to understand the sadness that also comes with it it's really difficult to get across coherently. So this is the other great scene in the movie.
The most important scene in the movie, I would say, probably the most important scene. She does say the name of the movie in this scene, and I don't think it entirely works. She says, "Hiro, I want to go home. This isn't rock and roll. It's just Tokyo pop."
Just Tokyo pop.
But the quote that I want to say, the big thing that I pull out of this scene is, I mean, it's a feeling that I totally understand. And she says, "No one hears our music. They look at my skin and my eyes and my hair." Man, I get that feeling so much.
So deep.
And it's not about malicious racism. It's not about feeling like you're being wronged in any way. It's this huge, frustrating barrier of entry for those of us who really wanted to assimilate into the culture.
Right.
Who really,
right.
really
That's
want
the thing
to.
is that when you go over there and you stay there long term, you're not trying to be a gimmick of the foreigner abroad. You want to be a part of the society.
I think we've said this on the podcast this month before, but we know people that have been in the country 10, 15, 20 years or longer at this point, and nothing stops natives from saying things like, "Wow, you're really good at using chopsticks." And it's just like, every time every time that statement is said, you're just like, man, I'm back at square one.
You're fluent in the language. You're married into the culture. You have children who are
culturally
half
fluent. Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, and
not half, double.
Okay, sorry.
I hate the word
double.
Half. It's not half, it's double.
Children who are double. And I know hafu is like it's basically a pejorative.
No, it's not.
I mean,
though. It's not. It's not, but I think it should be. I don't like it.
Anyways, so the point is that it sounds really pessimistic and sad, but I think my personal opinion is that it is impossible for a foreigner to actually assimilate into Japanese culture.
I think this is ex-Japan, maybe. I think it is. Yeah, Dodo walks through and they all say, "Ohayou gozaimasu." Ohayou gozaimasu.
I think it is actually impossible for a foreigner to completely assimilate into Japanese culture. I think that no matter what, you will always be the outsider. Mm-hmm. And that means that no matter what you're doing, whether or not you are successful at it, part of it is a gimmick. It's always going to feel like that. Teaching English in Japan, regardless of the fact that I now teach English in America and that I taught English in America before, it still felt like a gimmick in Japan.
Yeah, I don't know, it feels trendy. It still feels trendy. It feels
There were times when I would teach people and I would go, they don't give a shit that I have a degree in this. They don't give a shit that I have experience in this. They're here because I'm a foreigner. That's why they're here.
I had neither the experience or the degree, and for the first 3 years that we were there, we had the exact same job.
Right. So it's very much so like belittled sometimes. You kind of feel, I don't know.
You feel, yeah.
That's maybe too strong, but it's just I understand so deeply when she says that she's never going to really make it.
It's very easy to become disenchanted with it and feel like it's not rewarding work.
Right. Which at times it can be. And let me tell you, when I worked at the international school, that was the most rewarding experience of my life and probably will be for the rest of forever. But it was a very different experience.
Well, and I would say the same thing about the time that I spent in public schools, in the time that I spent in a Japanese high school and in elementary school teaching. And it had, I mean, very little of the reward that I got from that had to do with what I was giving the students in the classroom. It had almost nothing to do with what I was doing in the classroom. It had to do with me being there and talking to them, mostly in Japanese. And that's something that they discourage, but fuck it, I'm there and I want to learn shit. I want to be there. I want to understand the culture. I want to understand the people. I care about the kids. I care about what they care about. And that's, that was important to me. So, what I got out of it was not so much about the job as it was about being there and absorbing it and doing my damnedest to assimilate, even though that's something that can never really, really happen, I think. And that's maybe a pessimistic view.
I think it is pessimistic of us to say that, but it's how I feel.
Yeah.
It's part of, I wouldn't say it made me leave. The thing that made me leave is I wanted to be, were positive things. It was wanting to be with my family. Honestly, that's it. Like that. Yeah. That's the big one. But I think there definitely is a sense of frustration that comes from knowing that no matter what, it's always going to be a struggle. So, anyways, okay, there are two major things I haven't talked about. One of them is the Western superiority over the East in this film, and I really don't think we have time to go into it now, but basically it's just subverted. Like, there's the whole Gaijin complex thing, and we haven't talked about that. I guess you can Google it if you're really interested, but there's a presumption of superiority that's repeatedly asserted in this film, even through things like how much money Wendy makes over the Japanese girls in the hostess club. And the reason why this matters, this superiority, is because it repeatedly strengthens the misconception that she has that, and I don't think she's a racist character or something going into this, but it's just preconceived notions that she has because of the society she lives in.
And the Gaijin complex is not unique to just Gaijin. It's a complex that exists within Japanese culture. And I've had many conversations with my Japanese friends about this. And this, again, product of white imperialism, is that there's this concept deep in Japanese culture that the foreigner is superior to the Japanese. And that's a crazy fucking thing.
There are things like, there are lines in this film like Gaijin don't have to pay when she goes into a club. Yeah. Anyways, it's repeatedly reinforced over and over in the film. And I don't have time for the theory, but basically it's like the master-slave dialectic, and it's this essential, inessential kind of thing. And it's subverted. The concept is subverted here because the positioning of the Japanese as the inessential is turned around when Wendy realizes what's really going on. And what's really going on is after the scene in the bar is a scene where she's talking to, I don't know what he does for her. His name's Minoru, I think.
Yeah, well, he asks
a modeling agent.
Modeling agent. He asks her to come work for him because he says that, that her act with Hiro is just a fad, and that, people in Japan get tired of things really fast.
He says, how long do you think a Gaijin can stay in the public eye? And from there, she starts sort of realizing what's going on. And she realizes that her belittling inauthentically produced perception of the other, of the Japanese, represented by the fact that she still has not bothered to learn Japanese in this movie. That's one of the hints, I think. And also by her assumption that she could find meaningful success in the Japanese music industry, not through her talent, but simply through her exoticism. Mm-hmm. And she has to understand that. I think she realizes it on the surface, but I think it's subconsciously there the whole time because her voice and performance has been secondary, maybe even negligible the entire movie. Mm-hmm. The Home on the Range singing is a perfect parallel to it. They don't give a shit how bad it sounds. It's just that she's a foreigner singing this song.
It's just that she's there.
And that's how it is with the band, just on a bigger scale. I mean, their whole thing was they just wanted a foreigner. They didn't give a shit who it was.
That was his last, like, kind of, conflict with his band, is that, okay, so she's out of the band, so what? We'll get another foreigner. Any foreigner will do.
Mm-hmm.
And he fights him because, again, they're kind of unapologetic misogynists and ethnocentrists.
And he's changed.
And he is a changed person because he's had a genuine interaction.
Right. And he's like, no, not any foreigner will do.
Right.
But she realizes that she was doing the same thing, that it's been reciprocal the entire time,
right.
These preconceptions and stuff. And that's how she is able to realize that she is the other in the situation.
Right. So the best decision that she ever made in the entire movie is in this scene, reflected in this scene, getting rid of that god-awful Jedi Padawan haircut that she has for the whole movie, because it is the Jedi Padawan haircut.
It is the Jedi Padawan
All she has
haircut.
to do is braid that rat tail coming off the side of her face, and it's...
I think it is braided in a couple scenes.
She looks like Obi-Wan from episode 1.
Yeah, she does.
Also, go listen to our episode 1 commentary.
I will say, though, her whole thing where she says that... okay, so she says, I don't, in that conversation that we love, where they're sitting on the bed and she has the line about they look at my skin and my eyes and my hair. After that, she goes, I don't belong here. If I stay here with you in Japan, I'll never know if I can make it, which is the perfect line to me. I'll never know if I can make it.
Right.
But then she goes on to say, I'll always be the gaijin, the freak, I have to go. And my only problem is that I think freak is a little harsh, for one thing. I think that's a little more negative than it really is. And then the other thing is, I almost feel like the film diverts a bit from its progressive themes in suggesting that any person actually belongs in one country.
It's even in the song. In the song that we're listening to right now, one of the lyrics is "Back in the place where I belong." Yeah.
Back in the place where I belong.
I agree. It's kind of weird.
And the idea that a person can belong somewhere is problematic to me.
Regressive, at least. Yeah. Culturally regressive, where it's like, no, we want to live in a borderless society. Like we want, like I love cross-culturalism, and I love like being able to experience things that are foreign to me, so that I can become a better, more varied person, a more worldly person, if you will. But yeah, like I don't know, the idea that you belong anywhere is kind of
and it's unfortunate
like everybody belongs
right
everywhere.
At the end, and I'm like, whoa, you kind of overshot it, maybe
2 steps forward, 1 step back, kind of thing,
a little bit.
Yeah,
but as a whole, though, this film gets the message that the characters change in the correct way, and they do it in a way that Lost in Translation doesn't.
Yep, pretty much. Last couple of thoughts. We get 2 songs back to back here at the end. We get Hiro's song, his goodbye song to Carrie Hamilton's character, Wendy, Jesus. And not to say that Hiro's song is good, but I don't know if you've thought about that, because it's not. It's bad. But it does manage to put the senseless mixing of English into Japanese pop songs to thematically resonant use. Like it actually works with, because it's a thing that popular Japanese songs have done for years, is just
Tokyo Slammin' Night, let's get on.
Oh my God. They just throw random English into these Japanese songs, which is something that do other cultures do that? I don't know. Like I feel like it's uniquely Japanese in a way, right?
Especially since most of the time it's really senseless.
Yeah,
like it really doesn't
sense.
mean anything.
But because of the themes of the movie, I think the fact that Hiro's song does what all Japanese songs do, it actually makes it work. Like he makes it work. Where no other Japanese pop songs in the history of ever really make it work. His makes it work.
Yeah, I
think that's kind of cool. And I'm sorry, I like her song at the end of the movie, like I said before.
I mean, it's fine. It gets stuck in my head. I just really hate it when you want to put on this soundtrack in the car, and that's what we have to listen to for forever on repeat. Wendy and we didn't mention it. Last thing, Wendy Peter Pan. Wendy, do you think there's some Wendy and Hiro too? Like Hiro, because it's, the American
idea of the hero of maybe.
She leaves for a magical land because she has problems, only to find that the magical land has problems too, and she'd rather just be home.
Yeah, that works. I like that.
Okay.
And we will end with the guitar lick from The Way We Were. That brings us to the end of another episode of the Popcorn Poops podcast. As always, you can find us on our website at popcornpoops.com. You can subscribe to us on iTunes and on Stitcher. Follow us on Twitter and on Facebook, where you can receive updates about the show, including our weekly movie still identification game. You can also follow us individually on Twitter. I am at Dusty Cram Cram.
I'm at Jesse Casper.
If you want to support the show, GoFundMe is not the place to go to any longer. There is a PayPal donate button on our website if you want to use that. We would really appreciate it. You can also sign up for a free 30-day trial at audibletrial.com/popcornpoops, where you will receive a free audiobook that's yours to keep forever, whether or not you continue with the trial after it has expired. We also have a merch store now, so that's cool. You can get a Popcorn Poops t-shirt or a tote bag or some buttons. We're going to put some other stuff, but that's all that's on there right now. Go to popcornpoops.com, and there is a link in the banner across the top for the shop. Each week, we like to highlight a friend of the show. We call them very affectionately our Poo Pals. Poo Pals. This week, we would like to highlight the As You Watch podcast, so stick around after the show for a few words from them. And if you personally are interested in becoming a Poo Pal, if you're a podcaster, webcomic artist, YouTuber, or any kind of content creator for the internet, and you're interested in becoming a Poo Pal and getting shout-outs on our podcast and on social media, you can contact us through said social media or by emailing us at thepopcornpoops@gmail.com. Next month, we have a new theme. What's our new theme?
Well, we are going to stop talking to you about Japan.
Yes.
Because you're probably tired of it by now.
We've gotten a 1-star review. That was the main complaint, is that we talk about Japan too much. And then we did an entire month on Japanese movies. So there you go.
When we come back, we'll be kicking off a new month here at PP headquarters. And we're calling it #VG month. VG standing for video games. Yay!
Not VD month.
Not VD.
No, that's a different month entirely.
VG. This time, instead of covering movies based on video game property, which we have done before, we'll be looking at movies where video games are just central to the plot. First up is Albert Pune's 1993 film, Arcade.
Oh man, it's a full moon movie. I think it's our first full moon movie. I'm really looking forward
I am
to this.
a big fan of full moons, so
we'll see where this one goes. I can pretty much guess this is going to be a month of terrible movies. So let's look forward to that, because those are always fun episodes. But that'll close us out for this week. Until next time, take care.
Bye-bye.
We are the Popcorn Poops.
Hello, everybody. On behalf of Nick, Joe, and Vern, we would like to invite you back for a brand new season of the As You Watch podcast.
On our upcoming season, we will be talking about franchises, trilogies, and series of movies that you will recognize and some that you may not.
We will also continue to post fun and insightful interviews with many people in the world of entertainment, as well as feature a lot of great guests from other sites and podcasts.
So be sure to check us out on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Podomatic, and on Facebook.
And don't forget to check out our older episodes on our site, asyouwatch.wordpress.com.